Brooklyn Carter, 27 years old, sat in the suffocating silence of the notary's office, the kind of silence that makes your skin prickle. The air smelled like dust and paper, and the old walls felt like they were closing in. Her brother Darren lounged beside her in a tailored suit exuding smugness. He did not even try to hide it. Brooklyn had seen that look all her life, the one that said she was invisible, an afterthought. The notary adjusted his glasses and began reading the will of their late grandmother, Margaret Carter, a woman Brooklyn had adored more than anyone. The words struck like thunder. Darren was bequeathed a three-bedroom luxury apartment in the heart of Manhattan. Brooklyn, an old house in a forgotten village called Wind Hollow. Darren scoffed immediately, chuckling under his breath, then leaned in to whisper with a sneer, "Guess Grandma thought you belonged in the woods with the rats." Brooklyn's throat tightened. She blinked hard, refusing to let the sting in her eyes become tears. Before she could speak, her fiancé Ethan, who had come only out of obligation, stood and snapped, "I knew this was a waste of time. A rotting shack, that's all you're worth." He walked out without another word. By the time she stumbled into the parking lot, stunned and humiliated, her phone buzzed with a final message from Ethan. "Good luck with your trash house. We're done." Her heart shattered, not just from the inheritance, but from the brutal clarity of who truly valued her. Everyone she thought loved her had tossed her aside in a single afternoon. No apartment, no fiancé, no support. Just a set of rusty keys in her hand and a memory of a grandmother who once held her close and whispered, "You are stronger than you know." That strength was buried under years of neglect and dismissal. But in that moment, standing alone under the gray sky, Brooklyn felt something shift. It was not hope, not yet. It was something deeper defiance. And it would be enough to get her on that bus to Wind Hollow. The bus ride to Wind Hollow was long, cold, and bumpy, the kind of journey that rattled more than just bones. It shook loose the fragments of a broken heart. Brooklyn Carter sat by the window in silence, the gray sky blurring into endless fields of frost-covered earth and leafless trees. Her phone was off. She did not want to see Darren's smirking posts or Ethan's absence. The humiliation from the inheritance still burned how her brother received a luxury apartment in Manhattan while she was handed an abandoned house in a forgotten village. Worse, Ethan's final words echoed like poison. "That's all you're worth." She clenched the keys in her pocket, her only possession of value now rusted and cold like the silence that surrounded her. The bus wheezed to a stop near the edge of Wind Hollow, where time seemed to have stood still. Houses sagged with age windows were either boarded or broken, and the street lamp flickered overhead like it was unsure if it belonged there. Brooklyn stepped off the bus, dragging her suitcase across gravel and weeds. The house loomed in the distance, surrounded by an overgrown garden choked by ivy and thyme. It looked more like a mausoleum than a home haunted by memories she barely remembered. Yet something about it pulled at her like an echo from childhood. A smell, a shape, a feeling. She paused at the gate, her breath visible in the cold air, then slowly pushed it open. The hinges screamed. Inside, the air was still but not dead. Dust hung in shafts of light piercing through cracked windows. Furniture covered in sheets gave the illusion of ghosts, but there was no rot, no decay, just waiting. As if someone had taken care of this place maybe for her. And in that silence, Brooklyn whispered, "I'm here." If you believe Brooklyn is about to discover something that will change her entire life, comment yes below and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what happens next. Because what she finds behind a hidden panel in the far wall, a secret that had been protected for decades, will silence every person who ever called her worthless. But for now, all she had was a suitcase, a key, and the whisper of defiance blooming into something stronger. Purpose. Brooklyn stood in the middle of the faded living room, dust floating in sunbeams like memories made visible. The house in Wind Hollow was nothing like the wreck Darren had mocked. Though time had certainly left its fingerprints peeling wallpaper, creaking floorboards, and the scent of aged wood, it was not abandoned. It was preserved as if someone had loved it in silence. She wandered from room to room, drawn by a strange magnetism. There was no vandalism, no filth, no chaos, just stillness. She ran her hand across the mantel, wiping away a layer of dust, to reveal a carved letter M, her grandmother's initial. As she turned a corner in the narrow hallway, her eye caught something off about the paneling. One section didn't quite match. Her heart skipped. Brooklyn pressed her hand against it. It gave way slightly. She felt around the edges until she found a recessed groove and pulled. The panel creaked open, revealing a small door blending into the wall so perfectly it would have gone unnoticed by anyone not looking for it. Her breath caught as she turned the knob and stepped inside. What she found stopped her cold. Books, hundreds of them. Floor-to-ceiling shelves wrapped around the secret room, packed tightly with volumes of every shape and color. Some were bound in cracked leather, others wrapped in faded cloth. Gilded spines shimmered faintly under the dust. A small desk sat in the corner, an oil lamp resting atop it, and beside the lamp an envelope with her name on it. Brooklyn. She stepped forward slowly, afraid the room might vanish if she moved too quickly. Her grandmother had always loved books, but Brooklyn never imagined this. This wasn't a hobby. It was a hidden legacy. She opened the envelope with trembling hands and pulled out a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably her grandmother's elegant, careful, slanted rightword. My dearest Brooklyn, if you are reading this, then you have found what I hoped you would. This room is yours. This library is yours. And it holds more than knowledge. It holds power, truth, and our family's soul. Brooklyn sank into the old chair letter in one hand, the other, tracing the edge of the desk. The pain from the inheritance, from Darren, from Ethan, all of it faded for a moment, as she realized this house was never a punishment. It was a message, and she had finally begun to understand what it meant. Brooklyn spent the entire night in the secret library, unable to tear herself away. Her fingers skimmed over centuries of history, the smell of old paper and leather wrapping around her like a forgotten lullaby. Some of the books were so rare, she dared not open them fully, afraid the spine would snap. She found texts written in Latin, German, French, even Russian, none of which she spoke fluently, but each felt like a whispered secret from a long-forgotten ancestor. She lit the old oil lamp and settled at the desk where she had left her grandmother's letter. The words still echoed in her mind. This library is yours. It holds more than knowledge. It holds power, truth, and our family's soul. Brooklyn closed her eyes, overwhelmed. The pain of the inheritance insult, of Ethan's betrayal, of Darren's sneering laughter, all felt distant now. They had taken things from her, respect, love, dignity, but none of them had this. None of them had this treasure. The next morning, sunlight pierced the curtains of the main room. She hadn't slept, but felt wide awake, electric with purpose. She made coffee in the dusty old percolator and sat at the table, flipping through an ornate ledger she had found tucked beneath the desk drawer. Inside were appraisals notes in her grandmother's careful script, and letters from historians, collectors, even a museum in St. Petersburg. Some of the books had belonged to nobility. One entry claimed a volume was a gift from Emperor Alexander II. Brooklyn stared in disbelief. Her fingers trembled as she picked up another letter, this one addressed to someone named Cecilia. She recognized the name from the family tree in her grandmother's journal. Aunt Cecilia, estranged and mysterious, lived in Europe. According to the letter, Cecilia had tried to protect the estate from Darren years ago, after he attempted to file for guardianship over their grandmother, claiming she was mentally unfit. Brooklyn's jaw clenched. So Darren's betrayal had started long before the will. He had been plotting, manipulating, and losing. Her grandmother had seen through it all. That made the inheritance even more powerful. This was not an insult to Brooklyn. It was a reward for her integrity. As she copied down contact details for Cecilia, her pulse quickened. There were people out there who knew the truth. And now so did she. The inheritance was not just valuable. It was evidence. It was justice. The call came just as Brooklyn was organizing the fragile documents on the kitchen table. her mind still reeling from the discovery that Darren had tried to seize their grandmother's estate years before. The phone screen lit up with his name. Her stomach twisted, but she answered with measured calm. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice falsely casual. "How's life out there in the middle of nowhere? Enjoying the squirrels?" She let the silence linger long enough for it to sting, then replied, "It's peaceful, and more valuable than I ever imagined." There was a pause on the other end, just enough to catch the flicker of uncertainty in his tone. "Listen," he began again, softening his voice. "Maybe we overreacted about the inheritance. I've been thinking maybe we should trade. I'll give you the apartment, you give me the house. It's only fair, right?" Brooklyn almost laughed. Almost. The apartment, once the glittering symbol of all she had been denied, now seemed so hollow compared to what she had found. She stood up, walking slowly toward the window, as if she could see his manipulation materializing in the distance. "You're right," she said coolly. "We did overreact. I thought Grandma had left me a burden. Turns out she left me a legacy." Darren scoffed. "Legacy? It's just a wreck with a pile of dusty books. You're not a scholar, Brooklyn. You're just playing pretend." Her eyes narrowed. "Those books," she said, her voice steady, "are worth more than your entire apartment. And unlike you, I plan to honor what they mean." His tone sharpened. "You're going to regret this. That house is nothing but a money pit. You think you're better than me now." Brooklyn smiled, the kind that comes not from victory, but from finally being free. "No, Darren," she said. "I've always been better. I just stopped letting you tell me otherwise." She ended the call without waiting for another word and turned her gaze to the fireplace. The room glowed with soft light, quiet but alive. The house no longer felt old. It felt like it was watching, approving. Darren had underestimated her. So had Ethan. But Brooklyn was no longer the woman they dismissed. She was the rightful heir. And now the game had changed. After Darren's call, Brooklyn did not feel shaken. She felt galvanized. The arrogance in his voice, the desperation disguised as confidence, confirmed everything she needed to know. He wanted what he had lost, but it was too late. The house, once a source of humiliation, now pulsed with purpose. She stood in the foyer, taking in the faded beauty of the molding, the craftsmanship of the banisters, the careful intention behind every architectural detail. This was not a crumbling wreck. It was a sleeping giant, and she would be the one to wake it. She started with the locals. They had watched her with suspicion, at first a city girl with no business in Wind Hollow. But Brooklyn made her intentions clear. She introduced herself respectfully, asked questions, listened. An elderly woman named Mabel, who lived 2 doors down, invited her in for tea, and eventually recommended a man named Jonas, a quiet, stoic craftsman who had restored every house in the county worth saving. "He's got golden hands," Mabel said, "and he listens to old wood like it talks to him." Jonas arrived the following week, looked around the house and nodded once. "She's tired," he said, "but strong. She'll stand another 100 years if you treat her right." While Jonas and his team began the painstaking restoration, Brooklyn turned her attention to the library. She reached out to rare book collectors, museums, and historians, uploading high-resolution photos to forums and private networks. The response was electric. An antiquarian in London wanted to fly out immediately. A university in New England offered to fund a full appraisal. But it was the message from a collector in Zurich that stunned her. If authentic, the handwritten journal from 1473 alone could command 6 figures. Brooklyn's blog, The Forgotten Library, began gaining traction. Her first post, a raw, unfiltered account of her inheritance, her brother's greed, and the treasures hiding behind crumbling walls, went viral. Messages poured in, words of encouragement, stories of similar betrayals, offers of support. One comment stood out. "Your story feels like justice." As she watched Jonas rebuild the front porch, one beam at a time, Brooklyn felt it too. Not just healing, not just revenge, something greater. She was rebuilding more than a house, she was rebuilding herself. And every nail, every brick, every word she wrote online made her stronger. Darren may have had the apartment, but Brooklyn had the truth. ChatGPT Jean Noy. At night, the house in Wind Hollow glowed with a soft, flickering warmth. Brooklyn sat by the fireplace, wrapped in an old wool blanket, her grandmother's journal resting on her lap. The floorboards no longer creaked in protest, they whispered, like the house had accepted her. Jonas had just finished restoring the staircase that morning, and the smell of fresh pine lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the scent of cinnamon tea. The walls, once crumbling, now stood tall with quiet pride. Outside, the snow had begun to fall, painting everything in stillness. Inside, Brooklyn felt something she had not in years: peace. She opened the journal again, running her fingers over a final message scrawled in the margins. The home is not the wood or walls, it is the one who remembers. That night, she finally understood. The inheritance had never been about property. It had been about purpose, about legacy, about anchoring a woman who had been drifting for far too long. The next morning, she stepped onto the rebuilt porch and breathed in deeply. Her inbox was flooded with offers from publishers, media outlets, even a documentary filmmaker who wanted to feature the forgotten library. But Brooklyn was not in a rush to sell. Not the house, not the books, not the story. Some things deserved to unfold slowly with care. In the distance, the village stirred to life, and for the first time, she felt like part of it, not a stranger, but someone meant to be here. Darren's voice was a memory now. So was Ethan's. What remained was this house, this moment, and the knowledge that she had chosen her own ending. Or maybe her beginning. If you want to know how Brooklyn's next chapter unfolds and what secrets the library still holds, make sure to subscribe and comment. I'm ready for part 2. We